3, 2, 1. Welcome to Module 3 of CommMyths. Module 3 is going to be about interpersonal communication basics. We're going to talk about several things through several videos this time. Today we're going to talk about myths about communication, and then next we're going to talk about communication blockers, then family communication, and then probably either gender or nonverbal communication, or maybe both. I haven't decided yet. You can see that this is very, very, very informal tonight. I didn't even take a shower yet today. I'm out here by the campfire. I've got my husband running the camera for me. Big Dan's in the background gnawing on some piece of trash or something. I don't know what he's doing. And so let's get started. Most people think they have very good communication skills. In fact, there was a study done by the National Communication Association that showed that 90% of people think they have above average communication skills. That can't be true because, well, the very definition of average suggests that it's impossible, right? So what does that mean for you and me? Well, it means that I think I'm a pretty good communicator and you think you're a good communicator, but if our communication styles don't line up, there could be disaster. So let's talk about a couple of very commonly held myths about communication. First of all, it's kind of a myth that people think that communication is going to solve all your problems. It won't necessarily, because sometimes you can just communicate in different ways. More communication is not better. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And it definitely doesn't solve all problems. There are just simply going to be things you don't agree on, and communicating about it just isn't going to help. You just have to agree to disagree. The next myth is that communication can break down. It actually can't break down. It's impossible not to communicate. Interpersonal communication is millions of behaviors. And really the only key part of the definition of it is that it's happening between two people in a relationship. So not three people, just two people who are in a relationship. When you get to three people, you've got group communication, and it changes a little bit. But it can't really break down because you're always doing it. Unless you're asleep or in a coma, you're always communicating. It can fail, it can be bad, but it never really breaks down. The next myth is that more communication is better. Communication is inherently good. It is not necessarily better. My husband can verify this, right?
Yes.
Yes, he is married to a communication professor, so of course I go over the top in explaining myself sometimes, and I'm sure he would be happy to tell you that it probably gets pretty obnoxious. I've had to dial it back through the years. I've learned to control it a little bit, but certainly in my younger days, I thought that if he wasn't agreeing with me, it simply meant that I needed to restate my point again and again and again. And it didn't really work for him. Did it, dear?
No.
No. Okay. All right. So finally, the last myth about communication is that it is going to be the same for you as it is for somebody else. We have a tendency to think that our way of communicating is the way everybody should communicate. And that's just not true. It's never going to pan out between you and any other person because everybody's different. And when we see that other people are communicating differently, they are not communicating the way we expect them to, we have a tendency to assign that as a character flaw. And of course, it isn't. It's just simply different. But all kinds of things can break down because of that. We'll talk more about that as the videos roll on. But let me give you some troubleshooting tips for being a more clear communicator. Number one, try not to be ambiguous. Your verbal communication and your nonverbal communication need to match up. That's very important. If somebody says to you, "Are you all right?" and you're like, "Yeah," well, obviously you're not all right. And they're getting a mixed message. And as you know, that's a very frustrating thing. And so that can cause problems in communication. Number two, be direct. Hinting never works. It never works. And some people have a tendency to think that people should be picking up what they're putting down, but most of the time other people can't read your mind, they don't know what you mean, and then you get frustrated, they get frustrated, and everything unravels. Excuse me. Communication should also be comprehensive in that it addresses not just the concrete facts of what you want to say, but also the feelings and the feelings of the other person. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about listening, because it's a really big, important thing with regard to communication. And another thing is that you should control your tone of voice. You know, be very careful about that. Make sure your tone of voice is not sounding irritating or too flat or something like that. It can very easily cause a conflict when there really shouldn't be a conflict. And so that's something to watch out for. And finally, be careful about the time and place in which you want to communicate. Certain things should not be said at certain times. It definitely doesn't work if you're trying to talk about something that's bothering you at 2 o'clock in the morning with somebody who's like really, really tired. It doesn't help if you're in the workplace and you have something negative to say, just blurt that out in front of everybody, right? So you need to think about where you are and who you're with, and frankly, who can overhear you. Because certain things should just not be said in front of other people. And I know you know what I mean there. All right, that's the end of this video. I'll catch you next time.